So we're back, and we're going to talk about home politics, and we're going to talk about home politics in 4 different fields. The first one is economics, and this is actually related to the movie you have to watch, Los Lunes al Sol, Mondays on the Sun, that it talks about this first topic here, industrial reconversion. This, in a sense, was already studied in 1981, and this all happened all over the world, in a sense. This is also related to the oil crisis, and actually Spain arrived a bit later because governments did not want to shock the market and shock the people during the transition. Already what people were, the changes people were facing at that time was enough, and they delayed it until 1981 up until 1987, and this affected several sectors. It affected coal mining in Asturias, it affected siderurgia, metal industry, in the Basque Country, and it also affected shipyards, particularly in Cádiz, and also in Galicia, and actually that's where the movie takes place, and that's what I'm going to ask you about all this package of economic measures that took place in Spain. And this obviously was very unpopular, resulted in strikes, people actually obviously losing their jobs, and this was a drama, and I think I mentioned this already in class. Then this is something that you can compare to nowadays. Companies outsourcing, for example, in the US, in the Detroit area, this resulted in very dramatic situation, people that have worked their whole lives in this kind of industry and cannot find other jobs because by the end of the day they build their career around this industry, and this industry does not longer exist. And how government was able to give alternatives to these people or not, that's the key point to this now, because this industrial reconversion, shutting down this industry that I didn't say this but I should have, this industry that is not competitive anymore, it was necessary because by the end of the day in an open economy, and actually on Monday I'm also going to talk about Spain joining the European Union. The European Union will not allow to subsidize this kind of industries anymore. What else happened in Spain at that time? Economic liberalization. And this means actually many companies, and this will happen later with Aznar in a farther shape, but by the end of the day, open certain sectors of the economy to the market. Before were monopolized by the state, but by the end of the day, guaranteeing free competition in several areas. And once again, this was a requirement for Spain joining the European Union in 1986. Fight against tax evasion. One of the key concepts during Francoism was, obviously we talked about the autarky and how the state was closed in the first phase, and then they were opening up. But something that was rampant during Francoism was corruption. And paying taxes was not enforced in the fashion that it happens in the first world countries, so to say, in the developed countries, sorry. And in Spain, one of the modernization that took place during the 80s was clearly creating a working fiscal system that could actually ask people and know when people owe taxes to the state. And this was very important because obviously this allowed the state to collect a lot of funds that later could be used for social expenditure. And last but not least, in the economic policy, because of these measures, because particularly industrial reconversion, and because of the inclusion of women into the labor force, this resulted in very high unemployment rates. If you see it in this graph, you will be able to see this better on your own PowerPoint. You will see that how we moved from 1975 to a peak in 1984. And later, this is what I was telling you about. In 1993 elections, Spain was facing 24.9% unemployment, which is massive. And obviously, this is a result of the industrial reconversion. This was actually structural conditions of the Spanish economy at the time. But Spain has traditionally had very high unemployment rates. And you see that during the economic crisis in 2011, with the popular government, we got to 27.2% unemployment, which is incredible. But this has to do also with the black market in the labor force, working on getting salaries under the table. What else was important in home politics? The armed forces. Remember that the armed forces were a threat. In 1981, there was a coup attempt that actually failed. We watched the footage of that coup in class. So it was very important. I think that it was very difficult for socialists to get to rule over an army that only 7 years ago was commanded by Franco. Because remember that the king is the head of the armed forces, but he's only a symbol, so he has no real power. So Felipe González was the person in charge of the army at this point, and it was to be seen how was the relation going to look like between this very conservative army and a socialist which was complicated. So Felipe González took this very seriously from day one, and from 1982 he started attending all military parades, and he was trying to get involved, get the civil arm of the government, so to say, get the government to get involved in the military and to normalize it. And this actually worked really well. You see, this was a parade in 1982 and was very symbolic, and that was an important change to prevent the army to interfering with politics anymore in Spain. What else? And this is the third part I was telling you about, welfare state. And welfare state, there were two specific areas that were developed at that time. Well, and a third one that I have not included there, that could be education, that was also universal, and also graduate education, like here we're talking universities, so they put fees that were accessible to almost everyone. But the old age pensions and universal health care were the two main aspects of the welfare politics of González. First part, old age pension, what he did was make them universal. Not only that people that have contributed to the system, obviously here we're talking about a public pillar, we're talking about public pensions. And remember that in Spain, public pensions almost dominate the whole picture. Very few people have private pensions, and the contributory pensions from the companies are almost non-existent. So most people rely only on the public pension, old age pensions. It was going to be almost everyone. And here we're talking it was everyone. The amount of it obviously will vary depending on how much you have contributed to the system. But the pension system that we have nowadays, we owe it to the González government. The universal healthcare, exactly the same thing. By the end of the day, he did exactly the same thing. He responded to that word, to universal. He made it accessible to every single Spaniard. By the end of the day, because of being a Spaniard, you had right to healthcare, and that's what happened. And this is what was done through Seguridad Social, Social Security, and that was also a universal feature for every Spaniard. Deficit of his welfare politics. We can talk about two aspects. On the one hand, labor market protection, because of what was happening with the industrial reconversion. This was highly criticized. Everyone who was inside of the market was well protected. Anyone who was an outsider, who had lost their job, he was almost on its own. And this is one of the main differences between a Spanish welfare state and, for example, the Scandinavian welfare states. Well, Scandinavian welfare states will protect those outside of the market, while Spanish welfare state will provide a lot, particularly in the labor market, for those who have not a fixed term job, like a job that has not expiring date. How was the word for that? Never mind. Because Spain relied in traditional families. Spain relied, for example, in grandparents. Spain relied in women to provide social assistance. So that's why this leg of the table is underdeveloped. Social services in Spain are not as generous as in other countries, for example, in the Netherlands or in France or in Belgium, and is due to the traditional family model that we have in Spain. And so it's a very similar case, if you ever research about this, it's a very similar case to, for example, Italy or Greece or Portugal. And this is what was lacking, particularly the Spanish welfare state that was developed over this period of time of socialist government. So this was all. I'll see you on Monday with another clip, and we're going to continue talking about the socialist era. Have a nice weekend, and I hope you're safe and sound back at home. Bye.